Oh, what is this? Ooh, we got a little stuff coming up here. All right, starting now. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Off the Bench. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson. And well. After talking last week about just where the UConn Huskies could end up in this year's NCAA tournament, Pat, I'll be honest with you. The last thing I expected was to be sitting here the following week with UConn as arguably the overwhelming favorite remaining in this tournament. And that's where we're sitting at here. Us UConn guys are thrilled with how everything played out this past weekend. One seed's going down left and right. We'll talk about those in a second. But this Final Four is insane, and it worked out incredibly in the Huskies' favor. How is it feeling? How's it feeling back home in Connecticut? Are there riots in the streets yet?
Not yet, but I've already got some friends talking about how on Saturday and Monday the possibility of heading up to stores to do. I don't even know what they're going to do, if they win these games. But the feeling for me has just been shock, especially against Gonzaga. I kept telling people I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. If they beat Gonzaga, I'm going to start getting ahead of myself. And watching that game, just watching them dominate a very good veteran team. I just it feels too good to be true. This team is better than 2011. This team is better than 2014. I am at a loss right now, and I still don't want to get ahead of myself because the job's not done. But this has been phenomenal.
No, I was sitting there in shock watching that game because you've got a 7-point lead at halftime. You're like, okay, this looks good. We look good. Everything's going great. But, Gonzaga starts hitting some threes. Like, this is probably going to come down to the end, right? Not only did it not come down to the end, it was pretty much over 5-10 minutes into the start of the second half. Like, as much as we are, UConn fans and don't want to get ahead of ourselves and be, too catastrophic about it either, I get nervous even if we have a 15, 20-point lead, but you could kind of tell. If you take a step back, you're like, oh man, this one, Timmy's in foul trouble. Timmy's got 4 fouls early into the second half. You're like, it's over. This team is running absolute train on everybody. The games have not been close by the end of them. We had a couple of close first halves against Iona and St. Mary's, but otherwise, these games haven't been close. It's really been a sight to see.
I don't have the number, but I believe their total margin of victory is at least 90 right now, which is incredible in a tournament, especially against pretty good competition.
Yeah, no, it's one of the most dominant runs that I can remember up to this point in Final Four history. And what I find also funny about, we didn't expect to be sitting here with UConn as the favorites coming into last week. I also didn't expect UConn to be almost the villain at this point because, look, I want to address people who, aren't UConn followers and don't necessarily know what this team and program has gone through since the last time they were on a national stage in 2014. Obviously, they made the tournament 2016, but the last time you guys probably remember them, 2014. Guys, this is not just a blue blood program that, came up short a couple times and is finally back in the title scene. Since 2014, I am being 1,000% honest with you guys. We did not know if this team would ever get back to this point. And that's not being overly doom and gloom. The move to the American Athletic Conference and the recruiting struggles and the coaching struggles that happened from that point forward, this, I know for a lot of, casual fans, it's just, oh, cool, UConn's back in the Final Four. And this is a big deal. This is a big deal for us after the absolute downs that we dealt with as a school. The time that I was at UConn, they made the tournament one time, won one game. And even that, they only made that tournament because Jalen Adams hit a 3-quarter court buzzer beater in the conference tournament that led to UConn winning the conference tournament and thus getting in. They would not have gotten in as an at-large. So it's crazy. As UConn fans, we know the struggle that this team has gone through, and I think a lot of people don't, and they're just like, oh, so there's a blue blood in here in the mix with all these other new teams that have never made it before. No, UConn, as of the last decade or so, this is just as much of a surprise to us that we're in this position.
And especially the last few years where the pieces have been in place. Dan Hurley's been recruiting guys. They've been playing well. They've been making these tournaments decisively. And then they get bounced decisively in the first round, whether it was against Maryland or, God forbid, New Mexico State. And you're just like, can Hurley get it done on the big stage? Right. We know the guy can recruit. We know the guy can inspire. But can he coach when it matters? And this has removed all doubt from that. Now he got a 2-year extension for making the Final Four. Give the guy a lifetime contract. I don't think this guy's going anywhere. But this has completely absolved them of all these doubts that fans have rightfully had.
Yeah.
And win or lose this tournament, they're back. UConn is back.
Right. this tournament was make or break. I said to everybody I knew, not that I was expecting this to happen or wanted it to happen, but I was like, if Hurley loses to Iona in the first round, which some people were picking because Patino and 13-4 matchup, whatever, it wasn't that crazy. Hurley was on the hot seat, and he's gone in 2.5 weeks from potential hot seat to locked in for as long as he wants to be at the University of Connecticut. And look, that's, I think, just the nature of the position UConn was in. The lack of tournament success for coming up on, for all of Hurley's tenure and then going back to the Ollie years, it was getting on our nerves, obviously. And Hurley, eventually we had to see it come to life, and we've seen it come to life. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's all coming together in the first year that we don't have any Kevin Ollie recruits left on the team. Not that those guys were bad by any means. Like, would Tyler Polley have a role on this team? Sure, he might. He was a good shooter at times, but it's just it's poetic justice, I feel like, for as soon as these are all Hurley guys in the fold, this team is making such a deep run. Dan Hurley got not only his first win in the tournament as UConn head coach, but second, third, fourth, and hoping for a fifth and sixth here as we move into the Final Four and potential championship game.
Yeah, I really do wish that Tyler Polley and Isaiah Whaley were still here for this, but
Yeah, Isaiah Whaley especially, glue guy.
They were a huge part of this rebuild. They were a huge part of the rebuild, and there were so many players along. I saw a tweet where listing basically all of the scholarship guys from the Ollie and early Hurley days that led to this moment, and I just wish those two guys in particular are here because they went through a lot of shit, and now I'm glad they still get to watch and enjoy the fruits of that.
Yeah, no, the guys that, held us down and got us through kind of the dark times and just had that slowly chipping away to getting back at where we wanted to be. Isaiah Whaley, Tyler Polley, Christian Vitale especially, James Bouknight even for a couple years there was just the best player that we had. Rodney Purvis, I'll even give a shout out to. These are guys that Daniel Hamilton, Amita Bryman won a title, so I guess maybe not so much him. But no, these guys that got us through that transition period, and they're going to be able to enjoy kind of the fruits of their labors, even if it doesn't result in a ring for them specifically. So hopefully it results in a ring for UConn. But look, if not, this has been a wild tournament in general. So I want to talk about just March Madness on the whole. Pat, first of all, look, I got to bring this up again. I did it last week. How's the bracket doing, man? We doing any better? You said you've done worse last week. Have you actually ever done worse now?
No, I have not.
Worst bracket of all time?
Zero Elite Eight teams. I had Alabama. I had Houston. I had Creighton, which was okay, that's a pretty nice pick. And Gonzaga. I was actively rooting for Gonzaga to lose. And after that happened, I was actively rooting for those other three to lose. I wanted Houston and Alabama out of there, and the last thing I wanted was to run into Creighton in the finals. They've beaten UConn twice. So as soon as UConn won that game, I said, screw my bracket, get these three teams out of here. But it has been a year to forget, and I could not care less.
No, this has been an absolutely wild tournament, and I want to give a shout out really quick. Last week at the end of the show, we had a viewer question that said, is this going to go down as one of the greatest all-time tournaments for upsets? And at that point, we were like, no, there were a couple of big upsets in the first and second round with Princeton winning and forgive me, I'm forgetting some of the other teams that won. Well, Fairleigh Dickinson, obviously. Furman taking down Virginia. So there were some good upsets, but overall it wasn't all-time great. Yeah, ever since then, I don't know if you'd call it all-time great for upsets because, you've got – these are good teams that are beating these one seeds, but it's definitely all-time great chaotic. And if you want to consider that the same thing, I'm not going to argue with you. This is the second highest number second highest total seed number for a Final Four ever. The number one being actually back in 2011, UConn, shout out, won it all, when it was UConn, Butler, VCU, and I think Kentucky were the Final Four. VCU and Butler weighting that number up with their 11 and 8 seeds, but this is the second highest ever. First ever Elite Eight without a 1 or 2 seed in it. Without a 1 seed in it. Texas won it. First ever Elite Eight without a 1 seed in it, and I want to say first Final Four without a 1, 2, or 3 in it. So this has been a wild tournament, and yeah, it may be the craziest one ever when we look back down on it. Talking about the 1 seeds, so Alabama and Houston both going down to San Diego State and Miami. Brandon Miller especially has not played well in this tournament at all. I believe he finished that game 3 for 18 from the field, and overall in the tournament was not good. As we talked about last show, he didn't even score against Texas A&M Corpus Christi in the opening round, not that he needed to. So this is watching those teams go down, I was rooting for it 100% as you were, even though I had Houston as my national champion. But this is, I'm just having a blast, man. Look, if you feel like you need blue bloods in the Final Four to make it interesting, whether you consider UConn one or not, don't care. If you feel like you need blue bloods in the tournament to make it interesting, I feel like you're just not watching the tournament. Like, this is incredible, and I'm excited to watch these teams go at it in the Final Four.
Yeah, I saw a lot of expected less than tasteful jokes about Brandon Miller on Twitter, but I think that we don't need to go there. But I think that's more of a testament to San Diego State's defense, which we'll get to soon.
Yeah. So let's break down the Final Four here, team by team. So first of all, I mean, we might as well get it out of the way. UConn is now the prohibitive favorite to win the tournament. Highest seed left. Most dominant performance of any of these teams left. Like we said, none of their games have been close, whereas these other teams like Miami almost lost in the first round. San Diego State almost lost in the first round as well, which just speaks to how wild this tournament's been, how different things could look if those games went different ways. But UConn has really not even struggled to this point. Knock on all of the wood around me. There's a tray table over here. 1 second. But this team is dominant, definitely the favorite, and Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't really see a weakness in this team right now. If they keep playing the ball that they've been playing, nobody's beating them.
The weaknesses that they showed during that little skid to start Big East play is gone. And the biggest thing that we saw during that stretch was they would come out flat for periods of time, especially to start second halves. Like, they'd go out and play a good first half. Like, I remember the Georgetown game where they won, but that was hideous. They almost lost. Yeah. And they just came out in the second half and looked terrible. And then don't even get started on the St. John's game. There are no signs of that team anymore.
No.
These guys are hot. And you know what? I don't want to give this too much credit here, but this team has gone the way Joey Calcaterra has gone. Because when they were winning games in the early season, Joey California was on fire, and he was useless during that stretch. Like, he didn't play. He was a DNP coach's decision one game. He did not play. And now he's shooting the lights out again, bringing the energy, and look what's going on. Not saying there's a direct correlation, but you love to see it. That's my worry still, is just like maybe this UConn team will come back and go real flat on offense for 5 or so minutes. But that would be surprising at this point, because we have seen nothing even close to it.
No, and they've hit a groove, clearly. This is back to, I had the same feeling watching the Gonzaga game that I had during the preseason tournament, where UConn, they went on that 14-0 run to open the season, where you're watching and you're just like, this team is so good. Like, what are you supposed to do to defend this team? Like, I'm just in an absolute bliss watching them play, because you're in awe of just how well everything is working, the motion on offense, the grittiness on defense. There's guys that fill every single role that this team needs. And you're right, this team is going as Joey goes, because he is one of those role players that, one of the big things the analysts have said is when UConn brings in their second unit, there's not much, if any, drop-off. Like, you bring out Sonogo, who is, incredible footwork, incredible touch on the ball, but you bring in Klingon, who doesn't have the same skill set, but is still going to disrupt a game arguably just as much, because I'm watching guys try and drive on Klingon, and I mentioned this last week about, Arkansas, and it's like these teams have never faced a guy this height before. I'm watching them challenge him, and I'm like, you thought you had a chance on that? Why? Like, you're going to get blocked into oblivion. Even Drew Timme a couple times, who is as experienced as they come, some of the attempts he had, and I'm sure he was forcing it a little bit, seeing his college career coming to an end possibly before his eyes, but some of the ways he challenged Klingon, I'm like, dude, you're not getting away with that. I don't know what you think this is, but no, it's been incredible, and I think it's the strongest all-around team so far. But look, the job is not finished by any means. So we've got UConn going up against Miami. Miami has made an incredible run here, but ultimately, should we really be that surprised? They had the best conference record in the ACC. I believe they lost the regular season title to Virginia by virtue of a tiebreaker. So people may not have had them on their radar as much as they should have, but this is a team with incredible guard play led by Isaiah Wong and Nigel Pack. Nigel Pack going just nuclear in one of their tournament games, 7 for 10 from 3, and this is a team that deserves to be here. It's got Jim Larinaga, who UConn has some experience facing in the past, so this will be an interesting matchup. But look, Miami, as hot of a team as they come, as much as I'm going to be rooting for UConn, with my whole heart. I would not be surprised if Miami came away with this one, despite how hot UConn's been. And if they did, look, they deserve it. This is a great, great team. And if they can keep shooting like this, they were a little cold in their most recent game, but in the Elite Eight, in the Sweet 16, on fire. So this Miami team has been incredibly impressive.
Yeah, yesterday, actually, to date this podcast a little bit, yesterday was 17 years to the day of the George Mason upset way back in 2006, which is still burned in my memory so many years later. The thing with this Miami team is they are so deep. Against Houston and Texas, all 5 starters scored in double figures. And they're beating good teams. They're beating Houston, a 1 seed. They're beating Texas, a team that Ken Pom, according to Ken Pom, was one of the favorites. And, they beat a good Indiana team and then a Kent State team that I thought – no, not Kent State. I'm sorry. They beat
Drake,
who –
our Bulldogs.
We talked all about Drake. We love Drake. We look for that. So they're beating good teams. They're not doing it very decisively. The biggest concern I have for them is they're small. Like, they've got a ton of depth, but they're all guards. Some of their biggest guys are like 6'7", 6'8". Do they have an answer for Donovan Clingan? Do they have an answer for Adama Sanogo? And I don't know if they can outguard UConn, because you got a guy like Andre Jackson, 6'7", could guard basically anybody on that team. And then even guys coming off the second unit like Naheem Aline, Hassan Diarra, those guys are really strong defenders. So I think they could probably calm those guys down. I just don't. From strictly a matchup standpoint, I don't see how Miami gets this done, but anything can happen. But I think UConn has got all the matchups here.
I agree. I think UConn, look, I'm going to pick UConn to win this game, absolutely. But if there's one thing that we can say after watching the run Miami's been on, they are not going to be afraid of this moment at all. And one thing I will say to Miami as well, not to discredit them as an opponent, not to say that I'm happy I'm facing them over these other teams because of how hot they are, but Miami, thank you for knocking off both Houston and Texas so we don't have to play them in Houston, Texas for the Final Four. Because if we know one thing about UConn this year, as much as they were all conference games, this team can struggle on the road in hostile environments a little bit, and this environment will probably be significantly less hostile now, knowing that there's no local blood in this game. So thank you, Miami. Now we can play you guys on a truly neutral court in theory. On the other side of the bracket, wow. Okay, the chaos over here. Look, Miami, crazy that they got to the Final Four, sure. UConn, 4 seed, but a lot of people picked them. On the left side of the bracket, San Diego State, first ever Mountain West team to make the Final Four, and they did it with just hard-nosed, gritty defense, taking down Bama, making them uncomfortable, and then fighting their way past Creighton into the Final Four. Creighton, like we said, very happy that they didn't make it there either, which is why I feel like a lot of this is breaking UConn's way. But again, knock on just all the wood everywhere. San Diego State, what an impressive run from them to just cap off how crazy this tournament's been. We have 2 mid-majors on this side of the bracket for all intents and purposes. San Diego State will probably get themselves out of that conversation in the next round of realignment, if whatever. But for now, it's 2 mid-majors and the first ever Mountain West team to get there. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, and we've seen so many times, we even saw it this year with Virginia, some of these teams that are really rugged on defense but not on offense, they catch one hot team and their season's over. But San Diego State has completely bucked that trend. And, here's some, this is the numbers in these 4 games, what their opponents have shot from 3. 20%, 23%, 11%, and 12%. They guard the perimeter like crazy. And looking back at their games, when they give up less than 75 points, they've only lost 1 of those games to a good Boise State team as well.
Yeah.
So their defense will dictate this game. And I don't know if Florida Atlantic has seen a team as good defensively as San Diego State.
Yeah, I think this is a point where a low seed like Florida Atlantic, although they're playing much better than their seed, could run into maybe the end of the line for them. One note I did see is that Florida Atlantic's home arena actually holds 2,900 people. They're about to play in an arena that holds 71,000. So this is going to be interesting for them. Of course, they've been playing these games throughout the tournament in much bigger arenas, but this one, in theory, will have a slightly larger turnout. So just a fun note on Florida Atlantic there. But yeah, San Diego State, I think, is going to give Florida Atlantic some fits, but Florida Atlantic has surprised us up to this point, and I'm fascinated by the fact that we're sitting here heading into the Final Four. Next time we record this podcast, the national championship will be completed. We are going to postpone the podcast by a day or 2 just to make sure that gets done, for logistical purposes. And we're going to be sitting here. We do it all for you guys. Make sure the content's the best it can be. We're going to be sitting here and either San Diego State or Florida Atlantic will have played for a national championship and potentially won one. I mean, after last year's Final Four of Kansas, Duke, North Carolina, and Villanova, we talked about it a few minutes ago. This is incredible. I love that one of these teams is going to get a taste of a national title, even if they don't come away with it. It's just, what a tournament. And, if I have to pick coming out of this side, oh, man, this is a tough one. I'm actually curious, Pat, what the spreads are on this, so I'm going to look it up really quick. I know UConn's favored by a little bit, but let me just check what ESPN has for.
I'm sure ESPN's not the best place. Probably like 3.5,
San Diego
4.5?
San Diego State is favored by 2 points according to the ESPN spread.
That's Caesars, so that's
okay.
Pretty legit there.
Yeah, UConn by 5.5. So those are the spreads for this one. Pat, as much as I do think San Diego State is going to ruffle some Florida Atlantic feathers with their defense, I'm going to go with Florida Atlantic here. I'm gonna just keep riding the momentum. They've surprised us to this point, and I'm done denying them. Florida Atlantic, the fact that they have made this run with all this crazy momentum. Of course, San Diego State has momentum as well. They're in the damn Final Four, but for them to get here with everybody doubting them, and now to face a team that is, not one of the best teams in theory that they could have faced, I think they're going to come ready. I think they're not going to be too overmatched, and I think the Owls are going to be fighting for a national title.
Who? I will disagree. I will take San Diego State just from the fact that you look at against Kansas State in the Elite Eight, Florida Atlantic turned the ball over 22 times. Like they were lucky to escape that game. I'd attribute that more to complacency offensively on Kansas State's part than something that Florida Atlantic really did. But they still had to go and win the game, and good on them, Right. They did it. But they're going to need to take care of the ball a lot better. And I don't see them doing that. And also gotta throw a quick shout out Jalen Gaffney. One of those
absolutely wild
guys during the hell years that this kid goes to Florida Atlantic. He plays about 15 minutes a game. Doesn't typically do a ton in the box score at least, but super happy for this guy to get to a Final Four, have a lot of success. Oh, you always got to root for most of the guys that leave UConn, but I'm real happy for Jalen Gaffney.
Yeah, I think if you were to tell Jalen Gaffney and UConn that he could transfer and both his eventual landing spot and the Huskies would end up in the Final Four, I think both sides would take that in a heartbeat. Before we give our national champion picks, I want to run through our Benchwarmer bracket pool really quick. Just again, last time I updated you guys, there was somebody with the bracket title F UConn, and they are no longer anywhere to be found on this list, as you can imagine, because Kansas got eliminated. So the teams, or the brackets at the top of this pool now, we've got Michael, who has UConn as his national champion. He's currently tied at the top with 690 points. Obviously, the potential for a lot more if UConn finishes it off. Also tied for first, our good buddy Connor Tynan, TiVo. His bracket was really on fire up to this point, although he had Texas as his national champion. But shout out to him. He did have Florida Atlantic in his Final Four, so no more points that they can get. Yeah, he's picked them basically from the start in every bracket pool that he's in. Yeah, he loved Florida Atlantic all year. In his own words, they've made me money all year. I'm going to keep riding with them. So he rode them to the Final Four, got it right. Kudos to him. No more points for him to get at anymore, but still impressive. And if UConn, were to lose to Miami, I don't think any brackets in this pool have that result happening. So Tynan would stay in, the tied for first spot. Third, we've got Sal, not the Sal we know, but he's also got UConn winning. Also tied for third, A. Hermes 12, and then tied for fifth, we've got Actually Trying and Kyle Berry UConn. So 4 of these top 6 teams have UConn as their national champion. Of course, they will get points if that transpires. But one thing I did notice just about all these Final Fours is, Pat, pretty much none of them, I don't think actually any of them, got more than one Final Four team right. Maybe there's a bracket further down in this pool that has that, but I don't think so, because they would have enough points that I'd be seeing them right now. But nobody, pretty much anywhere, got more than one Final Four team right.
I can't imagine it, because obviously the only people that did, I imagine, are UConn fans that had UConn, and then our boy Connor, who for whatever reason had Florida Atlantic. Like, I know. Well, there's no way. So I guess that does go back to our question from last week, that this has been pretty crazy.
Yeah, if only he had picked UConn and not Kansas. If only he stuck with his hometown team, he would have had 2 Final Four teams, and that would have been far better than what anyone else has put out this year. One thing I do want to say, I run a personal bracket pool that, Pat, you are also obviously in, and somebody in there. Yeah, you are.
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
I'm
are.
probably a bias.
Okay, I was gonna say, and then in that bracket pool, one of our friends, his girlfriend actually put in a bracket. He paid me for her entry, all that good stuff. She's currently sitting in first, has Purdue as her national champion. But Pat, would you like to know why she's in first? I don't know if you've had a chance to look at this bracket.
No.
She has both San Diego State and Miami in her Final Four. She can't get any more points, but she has secured a top 3 finish in our bracket pool of about 25-ish people. And if UConn loses to Miami, will win the bracket pool. So
Oh my god.
just goes to show you guys, when it comes to bracket pools, the rumors and the memes are true. Like, the less you know about college basketball, the better. Look, maybe I don't know this girl. Maybe she is an analytical genius on college basketball, but I feel like this is more likely that one of our friends said, "Hey, you want to do a bracket? Just fill out whatever," and she did so, and here we are. She's at the top of it with Purdue as her national champion. So, of course, UConn, please save us. At least get her out of the top spot, just for righteousness' sake. I mean, I need something to transpire here to get her out of there. So, UConn, all our hopes are with you. Pat, national championship picks. Last week, we both had Houston. Houston was my pick from the start. You pivoted to Houston off of Kansas after they got eliminated. I assume I know where you're going here. Are we both riding with the Huskies to win it all?
Obviously, my track record's not good right now. I'm swinging 0 for 2 in 2 podcasts.
Yeah, pick a different team. Pick FAU so that UConn can win.
Yeah, let's pick San Diego. Let me just say San Diego State, just to
Okay.
maybe fade myself. But we know. But realistically speaking, UConn is a wagon right now, and they would need to really run into an immovable force, and I just don't see that happening. But for the record's sake, San Diego State.
Pat's got San Diego State. I'll go with the UConn Huskies because my Houston pick at least wasn't cooked from the start, so maybe I've got a little juice in my luck here. Yeah, UConn, I just think strongest team left, and if they keep playing like they have been, it's coming back home. Number 5 is coming back to Connecticut. If UConn wins their Final Four game against Miami, yours truly will be at the national championship game. So fingers crossed. Yeah, I'll be flying in there. I'm actually going to WrestleMania this weekend. I'm flying in there into LA Wednesday. And then if UConn wins their semifinal game, I'll be flying into Houston from LA Monday morning to get to the game. So fingers crossed. Let's see if we can finish it off. But Pat, there's more going on right now than just college basketball. I don't know if you saw possibly the biggest football headline of the season, of the offseason, maybe of the season. It'll transpire over all of it. The Baltimore Ravens signed Nelson Aguilar. I mean, what a signing for those guys, huh? They finally got a receiver. And on an unrelated note, Lamar Jackson officially requested a trade. So I guess the Nelson Aguilar signing didn't persuade Lamar to rescind a trade request. Look, the trade request was made public today, but apparently he made it about a month ago. I guess the Nelson Aguilar signing wasn't enough for him to be like, oh, wow, you guys finally got me enough weapons. Who knew, Pat? What a shock. What do you make of Lamar's official trade request? And then we will get into some potential fits for Lamar. Let me put it this way. Do you think Lamar ultimately gets traded? And you're free to say no. We're going to diagnose the fits either way, but I'm curious.
I'm going to say no just right now, just a hunch. I would prefer he does for his sake and just for all his sake. The biggest thing to me is, like, he requested this on March 3rd, and all they've done is sign Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah.
So, like, either one, they're trying to get him back and be like, hey, here's Nelson Aguilar. Or like, oh, shit, we're going to have Snoop Huntley as our starting quarterback next year. So let's start building around him with Nelson Aguilar. That's just funny. It's been a very bizarre situation because I actually kind of liken Baltimore and John Harbaugh to their rivals, the Steelers and Mike Tomlin. Very respected coaches, future Hall of Famers, both won Super Bowls. And they always make something out of nothing. Like, it is very rare that team is bad. I mean, obviously, like Tomlin's, they're never below 500, but it always seems, no matter how bad the Ravens are, they always sneak out 7, 8, 9 wins. And I don't know what their plan is here. Either they're going to have a disgruntled quarterback, or they're just going to have a bad roster. Like, does Harbaugh think, oh, I can make something out of nothing here with Lamar or not? That's the biggest thing that confuses me. I just don't know what their move is. So part of me just thinks they're going to hold on to him, hope he plays for them, and obviously they'd be more competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're obviously hoping to patch things up. Harbaugh, was interviewed today and said nothing other than Lamar's my guy, and it's to put it in a few words. He's basically like, when he's back in the fold, we'll be going full throttle here again. So it sounds like Harbaugh and the Ravens want Lamar back. I mean, of course, why wouldn't they? Their other option is Tyler Huntley, Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley, but that's their other option, and that's not going to get it done if you're trying to compete for a Super Bowl, which the Ravens are, mostly wired to do at this point. Call it what you want. Lamar's weapons, lackluster is what I would call them, but either way, this team can win games with that formula. We've seen them do it before with less than desirable receivers in the fold. As long as they have Mark Andrews, they seem to be all right. But yeah, I feel like at this point, I'm leaning toward he gets traded. When you start to see so much public, not outcry, but just Lamar's tweeting about this now publicly, trying to communicate with the fans of what's going on. I just feel like it's getting to a boiling point where he's not really going to play for the Ravens under any circumstance. Like, we're not there yet. Maybe they can patch things up, but it's not. It's starting to feel like how the Deshaun Watson situation was playing out before the allegations got into the fold, right? Like, I don't know that Deshaun Watson would have sat out that full season if not for those allegations coming in, because that's what was happening. Deshaun was going to refuse to play for the Texans, and I don't know that he just burns a season on the sideline without that stuff hanging over his head. So we'll never know how that was going to play out, but I think it was heading toward probably a trade a season earlier than what we saw, where he eventually went to the Browns. I think Lamar gets moved. I don't know when. This could drag out for a while, but look, this is Lamar Jackson, shockingly enough, is the main character of this offseason. It's not Aaron Rodgers, who we don't have anything else to talk about him, again, as we mentioned last week, so we won't be. But Lamar is the main character right now. And I've got a couple fits here, Pat, and I want to get your thoughts on them. So I put together 5 teams that I think are the best fits for Lamar. I've seen a lot of these floated around, even more than the teams I have here. Some of them I disagree with because I feel like some people are mixing up what exactly a best fit is, because I've seen people mention like the Dolphins. And yes, look, Lamar is, I believe, from Florida. The Dolphins have all these weapons. He grew up a Dolphins fan, but I just don't see the Dolphins jumping ship on Tua that quickly. And yeah, I can go all through these NFL teams and say, what are the best fits for Lamar individually? I can just pick out the best offenses in football and disregard who the current quarterback is. You have to consider how likely these teams are to move on from the guy that they have under center. It's very easy to move on from who you have under center when who you have under center is no one. And we'll start there with the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts got jumped by the Panthers in the draft, so the Panthers and Texans likely going to end up taking the top 2 quarterbacks, that being C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, as we sit here on March 27th recording this. Look, maybe this changes. We've seen Anthony Richardson get mentioned here. But it seems like right now, Stroud, Young, and then you've got 2 guys after them who are high upside players, but more project quarterbacks. The Colts are a team that are more or less built to win as soon as they find a quarterback, and Lamar Jackson is perfect to get them over that hump. And they are in a position with an owner like Jim Irsay, who has come across as if he wants to be very aggressive and get a quarterback. Look, he's suffered through Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, and Matt Ryan the last 4 seasons. At a certain point, you got to be sick of it. The fact that those guys each had 1 season each, like, they've tried these little patchwork, tape it up quarterbacks, and it's not working. At a certain point, you got to go get a superstar. And I don't know that there's going to be a superstar available in this draft where they're picking from. So Lamar's the guy for them. I think that's the best fit overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think, like you said, from a stability standpoint, too, you want, whether it's Will Levis or Anthony Richardson or a guy like Lamar Jackson, they just need someone who's going to be their quarterback for the foreseeable future. They can't keep doing what they're doing, but like you said, pieces are in place. Jonathan Taylor's an elite running back. The offensive line looked a lot better at the end of the year. If you give one credit to Jeff Saturday, it seems that he sparked that offensive line. Obviously, they're going to be more fluid under Shane Steichen. I think that was a great hire by them. And, you've got guys like Michael Pittman for him to throw to. So I think that would definitely be better than Baltimore. I think most of these teams are going to talk about have a better receiver room than Baltimore. But I think I wouldn't say they're my favorite spot that you've got here, but I think that it definitely could work.
Yeah, they've got, I think, enough weapons. Look, it'll be better weapons than Lamar's ever dealt with in his career. No disrespect to Mark Andrews whatsoever, but I feel like this surrounding receiving core, Michael Pittman will would probably be the best receiver he's ever played with. No disrespect to Hollywood Brown. I just feel like Michael Pittman's a more well-rounded receiver. And then they just signed Isaiah McKenzie, who's a good player. And I know this might be me trying to talk up these sort of middling receivers, but that's all the Ravens have ever really had either. So I'm not upset looking at the cast he would have along with Jonathan Taylor at running back. And of course, Alec Pierce at wide receiver, brother of Caden Pierce, star of the Princeton run here, Princeton men's basketball in March Madness. So just wanted to give him a shout out. Alec was actually at a couple of Princeton's games in the tournament. So shout out to him. But Pat, I'm curious, we'll talk about this team next. Who's your favorite fit for Lamar Jackson of the teams I have here? And if it's someone else, we could talk about that too.
The funny thing is that I believe it's actually the next in line, the Falcons. I believe
All right.
The Falcons is the place to go for a number of reasons. I think he fits Arthur Smith's system so well. Baltimore's always been run first. And Arthur Smith showed it in Tennessee with Derrick Henry, and he frustratingly showed it last year that this guy likes to run the ball when he can. Yeah. And they got Caleb McGarry back. They got Chris Lindstrom back on that line. Tyler Algier looked really good last year, and I don't think they're done adding to that running back room. And Lamar would just give them another weapon. And, this is for you specifically, Bran. Lamar's always been good at throwing to a tight end. And they've got a damn good tight end.
They sure do. I mean, they just got Jonnu Smith from the Patriots, so they do have a damn good tight end there in Atlanta.
And again, same thing. Drake London would certainly be, at least from a potential standpoint, the best receiver he's ever worked with. So I just think from a fit standpoint, and I honestly don't hate Desmond Ridder. Like, if they say, no, we're going to roll with Desmond Ridder, I don't think that's the worst option in the world. But again, we're looking at a guy who's, granted, had injury problems and whatnot, but this is a former MVP who I think would fit perfectly into what they do. And it would basically just be Baltimore with a better supporting cast.
Yeah, I think this situation with the Falcons is defined perfectly by a SpongeBob meme that I saw earlier in the day of Man Ray and trying to give Patrick his ID back. And it's just like, Falcons, you need a quarterback. Yup. Lamar Jackson asked for a trade. Yup. You should trade for Lamar Jackson. Makes sense to me, so trade for him. No. That's what it kind of seems like, because the Falcons were one of the teams right off the bat to say, we're out on Lamar. Maybe time changes that. I would really hope it would change it, at least as far as them considering bringing Lamar Jackson in. But I agree with you. This is a really, really good fit for him. Lamar has sung the praises for the city of Atlanta in the past, and it makes a lot of sense. They do love running the ball. Lamar Jackson, Tyler Algier can just run the ball down people's throats all season long, and it would make a lot of sense. On the other hand, the Falcons' former GM actually did come out, and Thomas Dimitroff, I believe it is, came out and talked about why he thinks the Falcons aren't pursuing Lamar. And he said basically the Falcons are just now getting out of cap hell and they don't want to be back in it. And I understand that to an extent. If you think Ridder can be the guy and you have him on a rookie contract for the next few years, as we all know, that's the best way to try and compete and win a Super Bowl, because you can just spend all your money on everything else. Only the Falcons know, or think they know, what Desmond Ridder can be. So I guess we have to leave it up to their judgment. What we saw last year wasn't much, but he was a rookie quarterback. Can't really judge him too much. That would be the only thing, but I feel like if I'm the Falcons, I would send it. Next up on this list, we've got the Washington Commanders, another team that is just a quarterback away probably from being fairly competitive. The Commanders, look, the NFC East at times last year looked like every team in their division could make the playoffs. And this is a Commander team that was led by Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke. The fact that you can say that with those guys at the helm and then potentially adding Lamar Jackson in there, I don't see any reason why they couldn't be in the playoff hunt. They would be a very exciting team. And look, we've kind of tried to hype up these other weapons that Lamar would be able to play with on these teams. I think the Commanders would be, without a doubt, the best positional group that Lamar has ever played with. Like, better, well, of course, better than what he's played with, but better than these other teams we talked about too. Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, Logan Thomas. You got Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson at running back. This is indisputably a well-rounded group, and Lamar, I feel like, would just excel with those guys. So Commanders make a lot of sense. For Lamar himself, I don't know that he will want that just because of the Commanders being a disaster in general. But look, they might get sold soon. Who knows? And getting Lamar would certainly boost the value of trying to sell this team. But who knows?
He also wouldn't have to go very far.
This is true, geographically speaking.
And I think the impending sale actually kind of complicates it a little bit because, Dan Snyder could just say F you to the team and trade for Lamar Jackson, tank their finances, and then sell the team. Or it could be from the point where it's like, we want Lamar Jackson, but then they're like, but we don't want to scare off any prospective owners. So that's why I just don't see it happening to Washington. The fit is there, like you said, but I think just this impending doom of Dan Snyder complicates things.
Yeah, and we've seen beat reporters in the past, ever since kind of the offseason started, say Lamar's not coming to Washington. Makes sense, but look, it's not going to prevent me from saying this is one of the best fits for him and most logical ones. You've only got really Sam Howell at quarterback anymore. And look, maybe he's good too. We don't know how these second year, third year, whatever quarterbacks are going to pan out, but Sam Howell is all they've got right now, and that's not a ton. The next fit here, Pat, and this is one that's close to my heart, and I can't deny it, the New England Patriots. This is a team that I feel like has to make a big time move. We talked about it actually a couple shows ago. Somebody asked, what do the Patriots have to do to compete this year? And I took compete to mean compete for a Super Bowl, not just compete to, look decent throughout the season. If this team is going to compete for a Super Bowl, and especially if they're going to compete for a division title when this division is about to add Aaron Rodgers to it and just have elite quarterbacks pretty much across the board, whatever you think about Tua, I don't care. He plays well within that system. We'll talk about that another time. These teams are all going to be significantly better off at that position than the Patriots are. If the Patriots get Lamar Jackson, they're right back in that mix. Patriots defense played very, very well last year. Probably still would need to add a receiver to this room, but overall it still might be the best position group Lamar has ever played with if he goes to New England. You've got Juju, Devontae Parker, and then two pretty solid tight ends, Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki. Third receiver, be it Kendrick Bourne or Tyquan Thornton. I don't know. I don't want to just throw names at you guys and make it sound like they're good just because I'm saying their names. But overall, I think that's a better group than what the Ravens have put out. And this just feels like a splash move that the Patriots should make if they want to be taken seriously in the NFL and in the AFC East.
Yeah, the thing is, it would just be so against the Patriot way.
Yes.
Obviously, with Tom Brady, and I'm not calling Mac Jones Tom Brady, but similar styles, immobile, not huge arms, more game managers than anything. That's why I think Jimmy Garoppolo would have worked great there had he ended up being the heir apparent. But they tried this sort of type of thing with Cam Newton. Obviously, he was washed by then. They're not comparable in terms of where they're at in their career, but in terms of their style of play. And I just think that this late in the Bill Belichick run, I don't know if he would go against the formula. But again, in terms of fit, I think that would be electric to see what he could do in, and I have always been a big Bill O'Brien fan as an offensive coach, not as a GM, as an offensive coach. I think Lamar could do a lot of fun things there.
Yeah, and so the report coming out today that Meek Mill actually texted Robert Kraft and said Lamar Jackson wants to join the Patriots. That's a real report that happened today. For those of you that don't know, Meek Mill is tight with Robert Kraft for whatever reason. Don't know why that's a thing, but it is. So that happened. Yeah, it's probably the weirdest relationship I've ever heard of in sports and sports media and just pop culture in general, but whatever. Lamar, look, it's so hard to predict what Bill's going to do at this point in his career because you're right, this would be very against what he's done, but Bill has also surprised me in the past because I remember when the Patriots signed Stephon Gilmore to that big contract, I was like, we're paying somebody in the secondary? That has not been what the Patriots do. So just when you think you know what the Patriots are going to do, they ultimately will do whatever they feel is in their best interest and not adhere to any sort of trend or, identity that they've established. They're going to do what they feel is best. And look, maybe what they feel is best is holding on to Mac Jones and just keeping things the way it is. I'll be okay with that too, if that's how they want to go. We have a real offensive coordinator. Maybe we take some steps forward here. Maybe Mac Jones looks like what he was in his first year and then hopefully and then some because he can develop. But I just feel like Lamar Jackson he's the go big or go home move. And for me as a Patriots fan, that's what I want to see, knowing how flawless the Patriots will have to play to compete in this division, barring injuries to some of these top teams. It's just going to be tough to compete because you get outside of the AFC East, which is going to have three, in theory, very good teams in the Jets, Dolphins, and Bills. Then we got to worry about the Bengals and the Chiefs, and if we're actually trying to win a Super Bowl here, they need to decide if Mac Jones is their guy, and if he's not, send it. Make the move for Lamar. The final team here, can we keep Lamar in purple? The Minnesota Vikings. This is another one that I feel like is a send it move, right? Because Kirk Cousins, not a bad quarterback, but as we've seen this past season, the Vikings rack up a ton of these wins, fluky or not, as some of them may have been. Kirk Cousins could not get it done in a playoff setting, and at this point, I'm not convinced he's going to. I just don't think he's an elite level quarterback. I think he's a B plus quarterback and always will be. And I feel like Lamar Jackson is the move that you go and get him, and it takes your offense up another notch, and you can maybe get over that hump again, like we talked about. I think this is a very interesting fit. Lamar Jackson to Justin Jefferson is something I would pay lots of money to see.
Oh, that would be beautiful. Again, it's just something I don't see. They've invested so much into Kirk Cousins financially and everything. And again, you use the B plus quarterback for Kirk Cousins is like the perfect way to sum it up. Like, he'll win you games, he'll put up good numbers, but are you winning a Super Bowl with him? Like, we've very seldom seen Kirk Cousins-esque quarterbacks win Super Bowls. It has happened, Joe Flacco and Trent Dilfer,
right.
But yeah, Lamar would be them really going for it. But again, we saw the Kevin O'Connell system kind of work more with a guy like Jared Goff or Matthew Stafford, as opposed to a Lamar Jackson. But who's to say it couldn't work?
Yeah, I think it would be an interesting fit, a good fit, but one that would take a lot to actually make happen with Kirk Cousins' contract. And here's the thing from the Ravens' perspective, like, it gets you another decent quarterback under center, but I dread the idea of watching Kirk Cousins have to play with just the weapons that the Ravens have. Kirk Cousins has been able to succeed because he has the likes of Justin Jefferson and the now on the Carolina Panthers Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, TJ Hawkinson. Kirk has been blessed with some solid weapons. I think if he goes there, it could be a little dicey. But for the Vikings' perspective, getting Lamar Jackson would be an absolute boon. All right, we talked about Cam Newton a few minutes ago. I want to touch on this because Cam Newton recently said this, quote, "Tell me how these randoms keep getting jobs. Don't worry about it. I'm going to show you. I can't wait to show you. Ain't 32 quarterbacks better than me." So Cam Newton is essentially pushing to get signed. He threw at Auburn's pro day, and that quote, one of these quotes really stuck out to me. Ain't 32 quarterbacks better than me. I mentioned this in one of my skits earlier this week, but I'll bring it up in a more serious context here. That implies that Cam Newton thinks he should start. He should not only be signed, that he deserves to be a starter. I feel like if Cam Newton was ready to settle for being a backup quarterback, he'd probably have a job, I would think. This is not a Colin Kaepernick situation where, teams are afraid of media backlash with it. Cam has enough left that I think being a backup would be a possibility, but Pat, is there any way that Cam Newton deserves to be a starting quarterback in the NFL? Is he better than... No.
I probably wouldn't even put him in the top 40 quarterbacks in the league. We saw his last real chance to start in New England. He threw more picks than touchdowns. He was really, really bad. He still shows he can run, especially at the goal line. I don't think there's ever been a more gifted quarterback at the goal line than Cam Newton. But I think you're dead on about the fact that if he wants to be a backup, then he will be. Then he would be. But the fact that he either wants to be a starter or compete for a starter job, he's just not at that point in his career. He's older with the injuries. Again, no disrespect. This guy's an MVP, and that MVP season was electric. But it's just his time is up. Maybe not necessarily in the NFL, but his time as a star, even as a starter, his time's up.
And I think quarterbacks like this sometimes get a little diluted by looking at guys around the league and saying, I'm better than him. Cam Newton probably is, as it stands right now, a little better than some of the quarterbacks around the league. But here's the thing. The situation that teams are in with those quarterbacks, they need to stick with them and are better off sticking with them. Let's assume a team like Washington doesn't add Lamar Jackson, or a team like Atlanta doesn't add Lamar Jackson and shake up the quarterback room at all. These are quarterbacks that these teams want to see what these guys can become. If you're ranking them alongside Cam Newton right now, Cam might be above them, but that means you're either committing to Cam Newton, who at this late stage of his career has a very, very obvious ceiling on what he can be, or you send it with the guy like Desmond Ridder or Sam Howell and hope that they can exceed that ceiling. And if they don't, you move on. But you need to find out what you have. Cam Newton is committing to just having a low-level quarterback. So it's not always about you're better than this guy. Yeah, you might be, but that's not what teams want at this point when they're trying to find their franchise guy of the future. They're going to keep trying to find him, not sign you. Like, that's just how it is. I think it's a reality check that
teams either want establishment or upside, and he just doesn't have either of those right now.
No, absolutely not. So Cam, if he wants to settle for being a backup job, I think he'll get it. But as far as starting, it's not going to happen. We'll run through a few of these real quick before we get to what I'm very excited for here at the toward the end of this podcast. So first, just a couple of news and notes. The Seahawks bring back Bobby Wagner. I'm happy to see this. Obviously, ended on kind of a rocky way, and so to get Bobby Wagner here and amend this relationship, good for the Seahawks. Get a veteran presence in there as well for a team that exceeded all expectations last year and is also very young on defense. So a guy that can help them in that regard, even though they overperformed on that side of the ball, a guy that can maybe help them keep overperforming on that side of the ball. The Jets signed Mecole Hardman. So we've got another weapon for Zach Wilson. No, I'm kidding. For Aaron Rodgers whenever that ends up actually going through. Really stacking up weapons for Rodgers. Look, as much as I want to not have to eat crow again with this becoming like a Broncos situation where it seems like everything's lining up beautifully and then something crumbles it down, I'm finding it really hard not to be optimistic for the Jets' outlook if and when they get Aaron Rodgers, because the weapons that they'll have with Garrett Wilson, Mecole Hardman, and bringing in Alan Lazard, Breece Hall at running back, obviously, like these are very, very solid weapons, speedy weapons, guys that bring different elements to the table. I think they're going to be a really, really fun team to watch.
At the end of the day, they're still the Jets, and I'll believe it when I see it.
That's fair, and that's kind of what's holding me back from being like, oh my God, the Jets are going to win the division and compete for a Super. I'm like, the Jets are the Jets, and they're getting one of the most problematic personality-wise quarterbacks that we've seen in a while. So the Jets, another move that they did make, and a reason I didn't mention this guy just now, they traded Elijah Moore. So they traded Elijah Moore and a third-round pick for a second-round pick. So they essentially traded Elijah Moore just to move up around in the draft. This one didn't surprise me. Maybe the sort of lack of relative value they got surprised me. But as far as moving on from Elijah Moore got benched in the middle of last season because of some beef with the coaching staff. And I just think he needs a fresh start. He's a really talented player. I am a little bummed we won't get to see him play with Aaron Rodgers, because I would have loved to say his name just now instead of maybe Alan Lazard or Mecole Hardman just to see what he's got. But new beginnings for Elijah Moore will beef up a Browns receiving room that pretty desperately needs it. I mean, of course, they have Amari Cooper, but having Donovan Peoples-Jones as kind of the next guy up isn't really the way to go. Elijah Moore will help them a lot.
Yeah, Moore definitely kind of jumps into what Peoples-Jones is more of the home run hitter this year, and Elijah Moore is just a much better option at that. So right. I love it. That's my favorite of all these scores.
Exactly. And then we got another receiver move, one that we foreshadowed last week because the Panthers were interested in him. DJ Chark is signing with the Panthers. Panthers putting together an okay little veteran receiving room here. Look, I made a joke because somebody tweeted, I think it was ESPN tweeted a picture of the Falcon or the Panthers' new weapons here, and it was Chark, Thielen, Hayden Hurst, and Miles Sanders. And I was like, this is when you put together a fantasy football team of just fantasy free agents. Kind of stretching it with Sanders there a little bit. Probably not a free agent in any of your leagues, but he was pushing the viability for that at certain points last season. And then the other three guys were guys you could find on your wire at any point. I don't want to be he's trying to gas it up meme, but it's not a bad room of guys to help a rookie quarterback. They're not trying to compete this year, like we mentioned, at least probably not. So I don't mind the DJ Chark signing, and DJ Chark is one team away from completing the Cat Mount Rushmore of teams. He's only got to play for the Bengals at some point, so that's all we need. But otherwise, he's all played for all the Cat teams. Get him to the Bengals. One other note here: this is not free agency related, just a really funny headline that I saw. So, former NFL D lineman Derek Wolfe said he would combine Adderall and mushrooms and go into rage mode during games. Pat, I don't know if you read this story or the specifics on it, but this one, wow.
I did, and honestly, my biggest takeaway was this man shot a mountain lion, he's with a bow and arrow. This man went medieval on this poor mountain lion. It's just this. This took me aback because we've heard stories about I think it was Eugene Monroe, the old tackle, who was oh yeah, everyone's baked before the game. It's doesn't the NFL test for this stuff, or do they kind of just turn a blind eye? But this was nuts because on a personal note, I am a former Adderall user, prescription Adderall user.
Of course.
And if you don't need it, God, it locks you in. If you for someone that needed it, it was just okay, yeah, this is life. But if you don't need it, yeah. God, does that the Wired, those Adderall jokes, they're true. So I believe it. I can't even imagine mixing it with a psychedelic like that. That has got to be. I believe what he's putting out there.
No, this was my favorite part of it. He said it would sometimes that concoction would produce some pretty crazy word vomit, and apparently during a game he would say stuff to quarterbacks like, "I'm gonna eat your kids." That is apparently something that Derek Wolfe uttered to a quarterback. I believe it was confirmed to be Phillip Rivers, which makes sense. He has a lot of kids. That's a lot of food.
Oh God, yeah, well, yeah,
Division rival as well. Broncos
notice?
to the Chargers. No, he probably wouldn't. He'd be like, is one of them falling into the couch cushion or something? But look, a lineman threatening to eat your kids is some absolutely wild stuff. So I had to touch on that. All right, let's get into this, guys. I'm sure you've seen the memes and TikToks and stuff of how guys can sit around all day and just bring up old athletes. Guys, that's exactly what we're going to do here. We are going to put together a draft. We're each going to select 5 random running backs throughout NFL history, for the most part recent history, because these are the guys that stick out to us as obscure and random from our childhoods and on. And then you guys will try and turn this into a graphic, TikTok, whatever. But overall, you guys are going to tell us whose list is more random. Now, I want to preface this. There are certain guys that I deemed too relevant, despite the fact that you may come up with them as being random running backs. So no BenJarvus Green-Ellis, no Peyton Hillis, Jay Ajayi, CJ Anderson. These are guys who, while they may have funny names or had a very short peak or whatever it was, we're all super, super relevant at one point in some way, like too relevant. Peyton Hillis was on the Madden cover. We all know this. It's not quirky or anything to bring him up as a random running back. Yeah, BenJarvus Green-Ellis was actually good for a few years. Same for Ajayi and Anderson. So we want you guys to rate our list based on you hearing the names that we say and you being like, oh my God, that fucking guy. That's what we want.
Yeah, and I've also ruled out fullbacks, which is devastating. Is probably the biggest fullback fan there is. Especially that also eliminated Mike Tolbert from my list.
Yes, legendary
players. Tubby Tolbert is one of my favorite players ever. But just kind of from my perspective here, I kind of did it from the 2010s on. So I don't think you're going to see anybody from my list that really played a whole lot before the 2010s. And I do have one active player on my draft board.
I'm excited to hear who that one is.
I don't think I'll draft them, but I will make sure to mention that at the end.
Okay, we'll get the honorable mentions in at the end. All right, Pat, before the podcast, bestowed upon me the honor of making the number 1 overall pick here. This is a guy for me that towed the line of almost being too relevant. Almost. But I think he just avoids that line and is instead the face of this category. I'm going with former Minnesota Viking Matt Asiata. Matt Asiata, the man, Pat is cursing me out right now. You guys can't hear it, but Matt Asiata to me was the guy just threw up 3 touchdowns every couple of months, and he's the guy of this category. So I'm going Matt Asiata.
Oh, man. I don't know if he was going to be my first pick, but I wasn't necessarily expecting him to be yours. Obviously, we're going to tie this into old fantasy stuff. I remember trading Matt Asiata for, Steve Smith Sr. when he was on the Raiders.
Yes.
He was, still pretty good. I remember making that trade. That was one of those trades where, someone offered it to me, and I was just like, yes.
Yes, absolutely.
You always, think, oh, I don't know, but that was an immediate yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Damn, okay.
That's gonna be my favorite part about this whole draft and everything too, is we don't exactly know what qualifies to each of us as super random. So Pat's caught off guard a bit by the Asiata pick. I'm excited to see where he goes, and this is gonna be a great time.
So here's what I'm trying to base my thing around. I don't want to just go with funny. I kind of want a mix of funny and good, guys who are getting close to that line. So this guy did have, looking at the stuff, he had about a 700-yard season.
Okay.
And, I'm going to go with Orleans Darkwa.
Okay, that's a good one. I love that. I love the Orleans Darkwa pick. Look, another guy who was sparingly relevant in fantasy football. All these guys had their moments just by virtue of the depth chart being withered away throughout the season. I know for a fact I've started Orleans Darkwa in fantasy at some point. So, great pick.
And in 5 years from now, we're going to look back at some guys who got in this year as, 5 years from now, we could do this again.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Okay, with my second pick, this is where it gets tough. I knew who my first pick was going to be for sure. But with my second pick, I'm going to go with a guy who has a good name and who I also thought would be really good at one point. I'm going to go with Bishop Sankey.
He was, again, it was either Darkwa or Sankey for me. Again, before we started, I said about how, there's some of these guys that were, early fantasy draft picks. And I remember Bishop Sankey, God, the guy just stunk. It wasn't a case of injury. The guy just wasn't good.
Right.
The guy just wasn't good. So now for my pick, I'll go with another guy. He wasn't supposed to be quite as good. But a relevant guy. This is supposed to be more of a funny name. Give me Isaiah Pede.
Oh, wow. Okay. I actually didn't have him on my list. I like that one. I
That
remember
was
him.
one of the first ones. That was actually one that came to mind before I actively looked at a list of running backs.
Yes.
I had a small list to start, and he was one of the first names.
Isaiah Pede, part of that gaggle of Rams running backs that they went through before they finally stumbled upon Todd Gurley. You've got him, you've got Trey Mason, you've got Zach Stacy. Definitely an interesting group, and I will never forget the fantasy team name, Isaiah Peed My Pants. So good pick, all around solid. All right, with my third pick, boy, I could go a few different directions here. I want to get a name that just makes people be like, man, how did you even remember him? All right, I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to go with a guy who has a stretch that is forever burned in my memory. Ito Smith of the Atlanta Falcons. Pat, Ito Smith, I don't know if you'll recall, had a stretch of, I want to say it was either 3 or 4 straight games a few years ago where he broke off a 60-plus yard touchdown. And I keep remembering it as a fantasy football player being like, that's a fluke, I'm not going to pick him up. Did it again. That's a fluke, I'm not going to pick him up. Did it again. I'm like, all right, dude. I know as soon as I pick you up, you're going 2 carries for 10 yards. Stop doing this. So Ito Smith is a legend in my mind just for those little performances. They weren't that far back either. I want to say 5 years or so.
Yeah, he was always one of those like will he, won't he guys in terms of fantasy relevance. I didn't have him on my list actually. I did have Falcons. I did have Jaquiz Rogers. I don't plan on picking him, but he's a guy I had on the list. I didn't have him. Oh, this is tough now. This is because I'm looking at these guys and I see about 10 guys. I'm like, oh, I've got to have them.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, okay. All right. This is another guy who had a decent year, and again, mostly name here, but give me Joik Bell.
Joik Bell. Okay, I like that. That's a solid one. Pat, I remember Joik Bell. I actually watched Joik Bell play in person, and I went to a Lions game with my dad in Detroit, and my dad's commentary on Joik Bell was, why does that guy run like he's got a dump in his pants? So that's my lasting memory of Joik Bell. That Lions team had both Reggie Bush and Joik Bell on it, and so Reggie Bush, even at that point, was smooth runner, quick looking guy. So every time Joik Bell would come in, my dad was just like, oh, "What is that? Why does he look like he's got poop down there?" I'm like, you know what, Dad? You're not wrong. You're not at all wrong for that pick. Okay, with my fourth pick, Pat, I'm gonna do it. We talked about him off cam before the pod. I'm gonna go with Roy Halou here. I think Roy Halou Jr. is the definition of almost got to that point where he was really good. Had a season or two, I think, of relevance. Let me pull up Roy Halou's stats here real quick. But Roy Halou is the guy that it's just never really accomplished too much, and every time you hear his name, you're like, oh man, okay. So Roy Halou in 2011, his rookie season, had 640 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, 379 receiving yards and a touchdown. So can I do math? Yes, it was over 1,000 all-purpose yards. So that was kind of his jump onto the scene moment. Beyond then, didn't really do a lot. 700 or so all-purpose yards in 2014. Short career, but a memorable guy nonetheless.
See, I've got so many guys here. I'm aggressively cutting down my list right now.
Yeah.
Of guys who I want to take here. I'm trying to think who I should take now because I know I'm gonna go random at the last minute. Okay, I'll go with one of the big busts. This is another guy. Our friend Dan took this guy really, really early in a fantasy draft. I just remember every time we would be watching a game, he would say to me and our friend Brett, he would go, "Brett, that's not Paul Perkins." Every time somebody else on the Giants had the ball. So
yes.
For anecdote's sake, I'm gonna go Paul Perkins. That again, just another guy like Bishop Sankey, supposed to be a starter on a solid offense, and he just stunk.
Yeah. That's what's funny. Some of these guys that we're bringing up are guys that were handed the workhorse role in theory, and they just said, "You can have it back. I don't want it." Paul Perkins kind of being one of those guys out of UCLA. I had him on my list too. I remember being super excited about him, and it just did not materialize for that guy. All right. With my fifth pick, I've got a few guys here. So I don't know that I didn't really go funny name for too many of my guys. I mean, I guess Bishop Sankey kind of qualifies, but I feel like I need to mix in a funny name just to round this thing out. Couple other guys I'm considering, I'll just say before I make my pick. Joseph Randle was a guy who I thought was going to be really good.
Gotta have some criminal on your team.
Yeah, only remembered for stealing underwear now. David Wilson, another Giants legend who was supposed to be good and just didn't pan out. But Pat, ultimately, I am going to go with former Carolina Panther Fozzie Whitaker here.
Yeah, I see. I have him bolded right now as one of my possible last picks.
Don't have much to say except his name's Fozzie Whitaker, guys. That's really all you need to know.
So I mean, I'm kind of just I'm not going to read my whole list of what I have, but this was some of my thought process here. I felt like some of the names were too low hanging fruit. Like no one cares about Chris Agbanaya. Because I wanted this to be random, but not too random. Mm-hmm. And then Anthony Boobie Dixon was just too low hanging of fruit for me. I thought about some criminals. I thought about Joseph Randle, Darius Geis. I wanted to get a little.
Oh wow, Darius Geis would have been that's a good pick actually, because he was supposed to be really good recently, and just wow.
And and then you look at a guy like Zach Zenner.
We love white running backs. We love it.
Guys that always popped up, and then everyone loves Jonas Gray. Everyone loves Jonas Gray, especially you. One of the most infamous downfalls in NFL history, and then the active player. Any guesses on who the active player is?
Active player, oh boy. I feel like trying to run through running backs would be really tough.
This player was fantasy relevant this past year, like towards the end of the year.
This past year.
Not like the guy, but in a group of guys where it was like, oh yeah, but we like this guy, but this guy's here to get some carries.
Okay. Okay, I want to say one thing. Baltimore Ravens or no?
No.
Just because they feel like they ran through a lot of running backs. Funny name. I got nothing. I'm not going to be able to come up with it. Who is it?
This is not my pick, but the active guy was Dare Ogunbowale.
Dare Ogunbowale. Good pick. Brother of Arike Ogunbowale. Legendary Notre Dame player and current Dallas Wings, I think, still. Potentially went to another team. But either way, hit that legendary buzzer beater in college.
But now my actual last pick. We mentioned Zach Zenner. We love the right running backs. Give me the intern, Patrick Laird.
Patrick Laird. Isn't Patrick Laird technically a fullback? You said no fullbacks.
No, he was.
Is he not? Okay. Oh, no, you're right. I'm thinking of Patrick Ricard. You're right.
Oh, Patrick Ricard. Oh,
you're right. Patrick Ricard's too good for this. You're right. No, Patrick Laird. That's a really good pick.
Oh, he's active. He's active.
Is he active? Okay, man. Yeah,
running back in this.
I remember Patrick Laird getting some run for the Dolphins a couple years, maybe last year.
Where it was
recently though,
like 2 or 3 years ago when it was like Gaskin and Ahmed. And a disaster in that backfield.
Yes,
Patrick Laird. There were a couple Patrick Laird weeks, and it was just electric. And I love the guy.
Patrick Laird is a good pick. Okay, that's a really good one, Pat. That may seal it for you. I'm curious to see what the people believe. I want to take a poll of this once we get a graphic and video and stuff together. But that's a really good list you put together. One thing I do want to say, too, you mentioned Jonas Gray. I feel like we might get roasted here for neither of us picking Jonas Gray. But to me, he almost toes the line of being too relevant because he was too infamously, bad, if that makes any sense. Had too infamous of a thing. Yeah, he had too infamous of a thing. Like, Asiata, I think, is close because of the so many multi-touchdown games. But to me, Jonas Gray, everyone remembers that fall-off. So we're trying to go a little more random than that. That's why he's not on either of our teams.
Exactly. That's what I would say. He's too notable. Like, there were some of these guys that I picked where I was like, oh, yeah. But, Jonas Gray, when I got to his name, I was like, oh, yeah, Jonas Gray. Once
you mention him, everybody remembers the 4-touchdown game.
Not off my radar, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So that's our teams. I'll read them off real quick just so we have them. My 5, Matt Asiata, Bishop Sankey, Ito Smith, Roy Halou Jr., and Fozzie Whitaker. Pat going with Orleans Darkwa, Isaiah Peed, Joik Bell, Paul Perkins, and Patrick Laird. Just 10 guys who are just so mid or below mid. I love it. Great pick.
Matt Asiata is the best player out of that group. It's so sad.
I'm excited to put this together. Get a little graphic of Matt Asiata, throw him over our faces. All right. As always, we finish this off with our viewer questions of the week, and we've got some good ones. First of all, we've got from B. Allison 9000. favorite UConn Huskies moment ever. So look, as both Connecticut guys, I figured we'd have some good answers for this, Pat. My answer, I'm going to give kind of two answers. So my number one, obviously, to me it's obviously, is the 2014 national championship run just as a whole. That was such an unexpected run, from that team getting blown out by Louisville toward the end of the season to winning the national title on the back of Shabazz Napier, Ryan Boatwright, DeAndre Daniels, Niels Giffey. Like, that is just an incredible team, an incredible run, and I was in awe. But the one moment that I will bring up, I actually mentioned it earlier in the pod, was that Jalen Adams three-quarter court buzzer beater to help make the tournament. I remember I was sitting with my college roommate, and we weren't on campus at the time. We were at home, and we are just watching that. It's in the third overtime against Cincinnati, to set the scene here. Third overtime against Cincinnati, conference tournament. Cincinnati had just made a three-pointer to go up 3, 0.8 seconds left. Jalen Adams tosses one up from three-quarters court, makes it, sends it to fourth overtime, and UConn pulls it out. And again, had to win that conference tournament to make the NCAA tournament. Did so following. I just remember going crazy because at that point we had suffered through two seasons, only one season at that point of not making the tournament, but we still never expected that to happen after coming off a national title the year before. So getting us potentially back in the tourney with that shot, we were on the floor. Just an incredible shot, and I will drink Cincinnati's tears forever because of that.
That's my obvious answer. My story was, I remember I was just home watching the game by myself, empty house. And not only did I don't think I've ever screamed that loud or gotten to such a high pitch in my voice when he made that shot with just an, oh my God.
Yeah.
And the call was amazing. Mike Patrick going like, oh, this one's good if it goes. And Len Elmer just like, oh my God, it did.
Oh, it did. Yeah.
Holy cow. That's one that just gives me chills. I know it's not like a super legendary call, but for UConn fans, like, that's probably the call. That was big for that one was big for me. And then just to get another different one in there to different up, I went to the first ever battle for Atlantis when it was like UConn in a bunch of bumps, and they didn't win, but we met like Ryan Boatwright, Alex Oriaki, Jeremy Lamb, NBA, and then like in the stands, Hashim the Beat, Kemba Walker, and Kevin Ollie, an assistant coach at the time. And
okay.
I remember my dad said to him, he said, so, hey, when are you going to be the coach of this team? And he goes, oh, I don't know about that. And I wish we never knew about that. But that's why I don't like to talk too much trash about Kevin Ollie, because he was so nice to me and my father.
Yeah.
So, I appreciated that guy. And, but definitely Jalen Adams.
Yeah, and ultimately, Kevin Ollie did steer that ship for the national title, too. I'll give him some credit for that. Obviously, Calhoun recruits, whatever you want to say, but still thankful for him. Still thankful that he steered the ship the right direction. And one moment, too, that I have to mention that people listening to this might be surprised isn't here. Step back, Walker, cardiac Kemba. You want to know why it's not on my list? We were in school, Pat. Do you recall, like, this game was on at 10 a.m. Eastern time? I believe we were in school during this game, and I remember watching the game cast of it and just seeing UConn's points go up and that we beat Pitt. Didn't know what happened at the time, so I think just not having that living in the moment of it type of thing is what keeps it off of our favorite moments. But look, in terms of objective best moments in UConn history, I don't even know if it's close. I don't even know if it's close with that shot. That shot was unbelievable. All right, second question here. From Jacob Rivera, what eliminated team from the NCAA tournament do you wish was still in / deserves a second chance? I thought this was interesting to bring up because my initial answer is none of them. I love the chaos of how this tournament's turned out, and honestly, if you lose, you lose. And it is what it is. You have to find a way to win the game. I'm not sure what my answer would be if I step back from that perspective. Let me look up and down the bracket really quick just to see, because there are teams like, look, I can say I wish Drake had upset Miami and, seen what they could have done beyond that, but I feel like they could have just, fallen to Houston at some point. So let me look here and just see who I wish went a little further. Pat, I don't know if you have an answer while I peruse.
I think the answer, it was who I mentioned a couple weeks ago, is like one of my sleeper favorites, Utah State, especially with how that bracket went down. Like, I had them in the Sweet 16 beating Arizona in the second round. So when Arizona lost in the first round, I was so mad because I had them, that was a favorite that I had going down early, but I just had the wrong team. And, the metrics loved them, Ken Pom loved them, and we saw what San Diego State did, conference opponent, in the same region, actually. So it would have been fun to see in the chaos if Utah State maybe a Mountain West rematch there in the Elite Eight.
I like that pick. I'm gonna go similar answer because of how the bracket ultimately played out. I'm gonna go with Oral Roberts. I just wish Oral Roberts didn't come out so flat against Duke. Duke took them down, and we were like, oh man, okay, this is Duke continuing the momentum they put together at the end of the season, and they're probably going to go to the Final Four because this region is weak. And then Duke just ended up losing to Tennessee. I just wonder what kind of fight Oral Roberts could have brought to the table if they had a better day against Duke, and then were able to get some things going in the future rounds. But ultimately, look, that's why my real answer is none of them. If you lose, you're out. Like I don't think anybody didn't deserve to lose. You got to win these games, especially the teams that got upset monumentally, like Purdue and Virginia and Arizona. And Arizona's even a good answer. Like I'd be curious to see what they could have done if they didn't beat Princeton, but don't lose to Princeton. How about that? So that's really what it comes down to. But I'll go with Oral Roberts here for my answer. And then down to NFL again, just to close things out. What is the best move made by any team this offseason? I think there's a lot of options here. I'm going to go with the easy one and just say it's the Chicago Bears trading their number one overall pick. I feel like they just got so much value back for that. And it is easy to say that they made the best move because of all the leverage that they had to do so. They had to suck for years to get put into the position really to be able to make that trade, but they got the most out of it. They got a new wide receiver 1 for Justin Fields. They got good draft picks. I'm going with that move, and but there were some good free agent moves as well that you could consider here.
Yeah, that was the first one that jumped to my mind, but the one I'll say is it's kind of a two-piece move here. The Giants getting that deal done with Daniel Jones, jury's still out on whether he actually deserved that. But based on how he played last year, yes, he did earn that money last year. But the reason I like it so much was that it would have been a disaster for them to sign Saquon to a long-term deal. And I think the fact that they were able to keep both of those guys and not pay Saquon at the same time was the ideal situation for them. So, we'll see with Daniel Jones. I'm a believer. I'm a personal believer in him. I think that was the move to do. But I think just especially the fact that they got to keep both of those guys, then go and get Darren Waller, I think that just kind of put all the pieces in place.
Yeah, I think, it's another thing brings me back to how much I hate the franchise tag, because you're right, that's 100% the best move for the Giants to not have to pay a running back that can fall off at any time. Just sucks that Saquon gets put in that position, one of the best players at his position, and, he gets a year of being paid, top dollar for his position, but if anything were to happen to him this year, maybe doesn't ever get that big contract. Hopefully that's not the case, but I agree with you in theory. Just them being able to keep Saquon in general, I think was huge, because we weren't sure if that was going to be the case if they had to franchise tag Daniel Jones instead, and then there was rumors of Saquon to Buffalo and all these other places. So no, keeping Daniel Jones, keeping Saquon, and doing nothing but improving upon a team that kind of shocked the world this year, made the playoffs, won a playoff game, definitely a good move for the Giants. So I would agree with you there. That's definitely a good move. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. We went a little over an hour here because we just love talking to you guys. We're having a great time here. Between March Madness and the NFL offseason, there is so much to go over. Next week, we'll be able to reveal the winners of the bracket pool. But guys, you're either going to be dealing with very, very elated or very, very depressed co-hosts of this podcast. This is a UConn, basically sponsored, UConn-centric podcast for the last few weeks. And look, we are UConn through and through, even though Pat didn't go there, but grew up a fan, still a fan. I went there, all the same stuff. It's in our hearts. So root if you like us, and if you're not affiliated with any of these other teams in the Final Four, please root for UConn. Give them your thoughts, and hopefully we're excited here when we get back to you guys. Not sure yet. Pat, I didn't even mention this to you yet off camera, but not sure yet if the podcast will be on what day it's going to come out, because Tuesday I'm actually flying back from Houston if they make the title game, and then I don't know if I'll be back in time before you go to work. So look, the podcast may be out on Thursday next week, maybe out on Wednesday. We'll keep you guys updated, but we want to make sure we have everything to talk about that we can, including whoever wins the national championship.
And guys, if you liked what we did there with that random running backs drop, let us know. I had a blast.
Yeah.
I'm sure Bran had a blast. Random wide receivers, random tight ends. We get even in different sports. The sky's
Exactly.
the limit. If you liked what you saw, let us know. I'd love to do more of that.
Random, yeah. I think we'll definitely go through some random receivers, quarterbacks, all that stuff, and the other sports as well. I'm very excited. Man, I'm racking my brain right now trying to think of a baseball player that I saw. Nate McLouth. Somebody mentioned Nate McLouth the other day.
Why?
Former Pittsburgh Pirate. I came across it on a TikTok, and I was like, oh my God, a guy I genuinely haven't thought of in 10 years. But I remember when he was so good and hitting for like a really good average with the Pirates. Brian Reynolds before Brian Reynolds. So, no, we could definitely dip into other sports, bring up some more guys like Nate McLeod. So, yeah, definitely let us know if you guys like that. Otherwise, like us, rate us, subscribe on whatever platform you guys are on. And thank you for listening if you've gotten this far. Guys, for Patrick Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney. We will talk to you guys next time.
Go Huskies.
Go Huskies.